Product would have to be oriented around a behavior that you do every single day without consideration, because changing consumer behavior is nearly impossible.
Welcome to Partner Path, a podcast that unpacks the venture capital and growth equity ecosystem from a junior perspective. Young entrepreneurs and investors have already had a massive impact on the industry, having started unicorns and launched billion-dollar funds. We discuss these success stories and more by sharing perspectives and advice from some of the industry's most prominent role models. This podcast expresses our views as of the date published and does not represent the views of and is not endorsed by any company for which we work.
We are excited to sit down with Arjan Singh, co-founder of Jolie. Arjan's journey began working for culturally relevant brands across fashion, hospitality, and lifestyle, in addition to being a consultant at BCG, specializing in luxury, consumer, and fashion industries in Scandinavia. Driven by a passion for wellness and innovation, he founded Jolie, known for its stylish, filtered showerhead offering skin and hair benefits. Welcome, Arjan.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Will. Thank you for having me.
So your passion for beauty wellness runs deep. And it would be great if you could walk us through your background and when that passion started.
Absolutely. I'll say the passion is certainly for beauty wellness, but brands overall and brands that we interact with on a daily basis. My whole family works in fashion. I'd say that's my first love. I grew up in an environment where we'd constantly be talking about brands from not only the clothing that we were wearing, but the glasses that we were drinking out of, the beauty products that maybe my mom was using at the time. Certainly growing up in an Indian and French household. My mom is half French, half Indian. My dad's from India. There's a lot of Indian aunties in my upbringing that would have tips and tricks when I was going through puberty and acne, and I was putting on yogurt mixed with turmeric on my face when I was 13 years old, which, by the way, works really well, though might stain the towels and have mom yelling at you when you're in 8th grade. But the passion for beauty and wellness really stems from a passion of being surrounded by my family that's entrepreneurial in brands. So I'd say it's not just beauty wellness, but more so brands and starting something. And then the early part of my career, when I was in high school, I started interning for a lot of entrepreneurs in the lifestyle space. And I very quickly recognized that what I wanted to do, if you asked me back then in high school, is the same thing I'd answer today: create my own world and offer it to other people. And I think through a brand and a product that's consumer oriented, you can really create that. And then beauty wellness, I'd say as I've gotten older, has just become more important as we start to pay attention to the things that make an impact on our daily lives from a very fundamental level, whether that's sleep or drinking clean water or showering in clean water.
Definitely. And we will get into everything related to Jolie and beauty in a bit. But I think first it would be great to touch on you personally. Like one thing that we heard from colleagues of yours and just even me getting to know you in the short amount of time that I've had is just your ability to form meaningful connections starting pre-college and college and now. And, how have these connections and relationships helped in your personal and your business career?
I'm happy that you picked up on that because it's something that is a passion and a love of mine, is connecting with other people, no matter their background. And it's something I've been doing quite naturally since a very young age. And I actually would like to share a story that I think will provide a nice context on the core of who I am, which I think really makes an impact on all the other topics that we'll talk about today. And that's when I was 5 years old. I grew up in a Sikh family as well, where you're supposed to keep your hair long and wear a turban. And at that age, you have to wear a turban that looks like a tennis ball wrapped in cloth on your head, AKA I stood out. And there's something that my mom had said to me the first day, I think it was of kindergarten. I was about to get on the bus, and my mom kneels down so she can be looking at me eye level, looking in my eyes. And she says, "Arjan, when you get on that bus, people are going to look at you, and their eyes are going to be drawn to what's on the top of your head, not to your face. So what I want you to do is get on that bus, and I want you to talk to people, and I want you to say, while looking at someone in the eyes, 'Hey, how are you?' And the reason for that is to show that you're outgoing, you're friendly, you're not too different than they are, you're accessible, and last but not least, you're drawing their eyes down from what's on the top of your head to your face." Being the eldest, I said, okay, Mom. And I got on that bus, and Laura, Will, I said hi to everyone. And initially, it was just following Mom's advice, and it was, hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? And it wasn't just saying those words and then on my way and talking to the next person, but I was asking them a question. So I would listen to what they had to say, what he or she had to say. And I very quickly realized that you can really open up another person by asking them a question and listening to their response. And it became so much fun. I mean, that's really what it was. And this then turned into a passion where I would walk into a restaurant and just strike up a conversation with someone at the age of 9 years old, or I would be on an airplane when I was 19, living in Copenhagen during a study abroad, and met someone that to this day, someone that I actually ended up working for when I was in Copenhagen, a cultural entrepreneur, if you will, who is like an older brother to me, and we still have a great relationship. In fact, I just texted him 2 hours ago. And there's all these moments where I've met people in random scenarios, but have been able to create a connection out of that. And it's fueled by the story that I shared in terms of this genuine interest of reaching my hand out and wanting to be the one that smiled and the one that didn't smile back. And there's a curiosity that I carry around just genuinely. And it, of course, you asked the question, how's this helped in my personal and business career? From a personal perspective, it makes every day way more interesting. And I have a very rich social life and community of people around me, whether they're friends, acquaintances, or just merely conversations. And then from a business perspective, of course, business is so connected and not siloed. There are, if someone, we're working on a, particular retailer that we're trying to get into, there might be someone that I know that's connected to that person. So I'd say that the world gets even smaller when you reach your hand out there and have been doing that your entire life.
No, thank you for sharing. That's really good advice too, especially as a lot of people are thinking about their career and trying to build their network and just be intellectually curious. I think now would be a good time to switch to Jolie. It would be great if you could just touch on this gap of what's in our shower water, what's clean, what's not, and then why you decided to build a consumer product. Consumer products are getting harder and harder to sell, going to that D2C strategy, and you've done it exceptionally well.
I'll mention how Jolie was started. There's two of us in terms of co-founders. My partner Ryan is the one who came up with the idea. So it came from a personal issue. And there's two ways that this idea actually came to be. I'll start with the framework that was developed a few years ago prior to the idea of the product itself. Ryan had run a sneaker business before called Greats. After starting something, no matter what it is, whether it's a podcast or a footwear company, it's only until you start it that you learn what is challenging, inherent with that product or business. And there's certain things that you can't really change about that product or business that make it more difficult. With footwear, he recognized a few things that informed a framework for the next business. One, the product would have to appeal to vanity or vice, because that's what drives our consumption the most, fortunately or unfortunately. Two, the product would have to be one size fits all. After running a footwear business or being in apparel, you very quickly learn the headache that's involved with planning around SKUs, how many do you order in each size, communicating fit. If it's a good that's being sold primarily online, the returns get very expensive and it's a headache, to say the least. Lastly, the third criteria, and I think this is the most important one, product would have to be oriented around a behavior that you do every single day without consideration, because changing consumer behavior is nearly impossible. Those three criteria were written on a whiteboard, marinating for a few years. Separately, one winter, he was experiencing dry skin on his legs, very random. His wife was head of marketing for North America at ASOP at the time. They have all the product you can imagine at home. He's trying all this product, nothing's fixing his issue. He's in the shower one day and starts thinking about what we tend not to think about, and that's what's obvious and right in front of us. We do it every day. We know about the water that we drink, but the water that we shower in, we haven't really, as a society, put on the forefront as something that we should be thinking about. Ryan did some research, So, two things. One, the water is not as clean as we think it is. And two, there are shower filters that you can buy. They all look the same. This is now 2020. You can only buy them on Amazon. It was not a shower head itself, but it would attach to your current shower head. He buys one just as a consumer trying to fix his issue, puts it in, and then immediately his dry skin goes away. A few days later, the shower filter breaks down. It was a $30 product. It was quite cheaply made. It got clogged very easily. So then try to find something that had some quality to it and also a certain aesthetic. And that's when the light bulb went off because it didn't exist. Ryan and I, we had known each other, but we were reconnected at that point. And we said, this is not a plumbing fixture. This is not even a shower head. This is a beauty wellness product. And no one's looking at it from that lens. But the water that we shower in is so fundamental to the quality of our hair and our skin and is actually the root cause, not for every issue, of course, but for many of them. We call it step zero. Because no matter if you're using $285 Dr. Sturm serum or going to CVS to buy your skincare or hair care, the water is constant and the water is making an impact. And it's doing so on a level that's causing the issue as opposed to only amplifying an issue that already exists.
It also addresses so many issues too. I mean, you think about you're touching your face all day, your hair, and a lot of times you can only use so much product when really you just have to get to the root cause, which can be water. And I mean, I think of Brita, I think of the Lark. I mean, especially being in a city like New York, a lot of people are using some sort of filtered water. But I mean, walk us through the key features that really make Jolie work as you were thinking through the prototype.
So there's a few things that are or were and have been important when we were developing the Jolie filtered shower head. One, this has to be a shower and an amazing shower on its own, irrespective of being a filter. That means great pressure, coverage. It needs to be easy to use and install. So that is a whole bucket that needed to be completely best in class. And then two, from a filtration standpoint, we wanted to remove the most chlorine and heavy metals, which we identified as the main culprits of our skin and hair issues. And we wanted to do this in a way that was easy for the customer to replace the filter, because this filter, like all filters, needs to be replaced. We didn't want to have something that went in between the shower arm and the shower head itself. We wanted this to be, a unit all in itself. What we discovered throughout the process of testing every filter that was on the market is, and you mentioned Brita and Lark, a few other their drinking water filter brands. Charcoal is the standard for drinking water, and it works really well, but it doesn't perform in the conditions of a shower, which is hot water and high pressure. So it actually is clogging up the filter. What we use instead, two filter media, they're a bit more expensive, or one in particular is a bit more expensive, but it removes the most chlorine and heavy metals. It's called KDF55. That I know sounds like the most natural thing in the world. It is copper and zinc shavings. It's been around for decades, used primarily in industrial use cases, and we put the most of it in our filter versus any other filter on the market. And we wanted to, so I'd say from a tech standpoint, we're using different filter media. From a ease of use standpoint, we have designed a way for the filter to be easily replaced, where you don't have to take off the entire shower head every 3 months. You just unscrew the face of the shower head, and in 15 seconds, that filter is replaced. A very important part from a design component is we knew that we can create a beautiful product. That wasn't the issue. But how can we create something that is recognizable instantly and ideally over time iconic?
Yeah, unfortunately, I fall in the bucket of the old school generic filter shower heads, not knowing the brand, and also falls into the bucket of just one of the biggest hurdles to home improvement is getting someone to change a hard fixture. I mean, this is improving the person, improving the home. How did you think about changing consumers' mindsets initially?
We knew that by positioning this as a beauty product, it's a different audience than, when you normally change a shower head, it's because maybe you're moving into a new home and you're redoing your bathroom, you're remodeling your existing bathroom, or your shower head that you currently have simply doesn't work. If you're renting, maybe there's bad pressure and you're trying to fix that. But it's not something that's done on a frequent basis. And when it's done, there's also this perception, not reality, but perception of the install being difficult. And we knew that that was one hurdle, was the perception of installation. The other hurdle was education around, is my water not clean, and is it also causing skin and hair issues? On the first part, in all of our communication, we, for instance, our install video doesn't have a plumber or a guy that looks like a plumber that's changing the shower head, but someone who would be representative of our customer, which skews female. It skews someone who's very into their skin and their hair, and focused on their beauty. So from a communication standpoint, there was this change of perception around installation. And then there was also the education around, let's focus on what's fundamental. And step zero, or the water that we shower in, is incredibly fundamental, guys. There's so many stories that we actually uncovered just speaking to people oriented around travel, where they would go move to a new city and they got used to the shower water where they were before, and they've noticed their hair is either better or it's worse, or their skin feels different based upon where they were showering. But when we launched, I'd say the most important educational tool was this water report, where we offered for free as a lead gen tool. If someone signed up and gave us their email and their zip code, we could send them a water report instantly that tells them what's in their water. And that was step one in the educational process, and changing the consumer's mindset, not just around, I need to change this thing, but that this is not something that just pushes out water. This is something that has a fundamental impact on my beauty.
That's a great transition into talking a little bit more about your marketing approach. I think Laura and I have spoken a lot with SaaS founders and products facing enterprises, but haven't spoken as much to folks building out a D2C product. And so we'd love to hear a little bit more about how you've been able to successfully market the product and what you've done that's gone well. I mean, you've sold to over 100,000 customers. I don't know if you want to talk to the sales that you've been able to produce to date, but how have you been able to achieve the pace and momentum that you've achieved?
We launched about 22 months ago. As you mentioned, we have over 100,000 customers, which we hit earlier in the summer. Our marketing approach is rooted in a primary belief and a primary end goal. The primary belief, which sounds silly and obvious, is people influence people. And the primary end goal is create conversation. What I mean when I say people influence people is, when we think through the way in which we ideally want Jolie to be mentioned, is from a friend. If Laura says to Will prior to filming a podcast episode together, hey, I just got to tell you about this product I just used. It's done wonders for my skin and hair. That is way more compelling than seeing a digital ad on Instagram, or even seeing a billboard, whatever the other ways of marketing. Not saying that we're not doing that. What we started from day -60 is we seeded product and we gifted it to people. Of influence is the term I'll use, not necessarily influencers, but those that we knew would have big mouths where they'll talk about it. And this is a product that works. So they put it in, they install it, they use it, and they say, holy shit, this changed my hair and my skin. And then that word of mouth starts to spread. This is a strategy that takes time, because to build that momentum, you really need to start seeding over quite some time. And I'd say it took us 4 to 6 months until we really saw a step change impact. And just from our first year alone, we had 5,000 unique pieces of content that were then created by not only those of influence that we had seeded, but by customers as well. And we created this sense of what I'd call FOMO, where someone would post and say FOMO, and a bit of social currency. So all these people are posting about Jolie, then the people get curious as to what is this product that everyone's posting. And as a customer, when you get Jolie, I think the first thing that many of our customers are thinking of subconsciously is, oh, I got to take a photo of this. Almost, when you go to a restaurant that everyone's talking about, the dish gets served and you're taking your phone out, and you might not even thought to actually take your phone out. You just did it. And that's what we believe is happening, because we have so many customers that are instantly posting photos of the unboxing, videos of installing the Jolie, using it, providing a testimonial. And it's created this cycle where Ryan and I sort of look at each other and we half joke that it's out of our control, and that the customer base has become the sales force. There's another activation that we've done and continue to do, which are these sidewalk stickers. And this again goes back to creating conversation and being specific to the medium or the state of mind that someone might be in. They're 15-inch in diameter circle stickers. So the word stickers, I'd say a bit of an understatement. We put them on the sidewalk, and we have different variations of the phrase, your shower water is dot, dot, dot. Your shower water is dirtier than that martini we have outside Raoul's, outside Lucien, outside places where you would have a martini in New York. Your shower water is dirtier than the subway handle outside the subway station. Your shower water is giving your hairdresser nightmares outside the top hair salons, etc. The approach that we'll take and that we've been taking, it's such a fundamental thing. The water that we're showering in, let's make it relatable, whether that's a visual or whether that's a comparison to something someone might be doing or thinking about at that time. And that's how we like to engage from a marketing standpoint.
That's very interesting. And you really touch on a lot of the creative angles that I think is fascinating, something that's certainly untraditional. And maybe taking a step back from Jolie specifically, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you think consumer behavior or consumption trends have changed over the past couple of years since you started the business.
Consumer behavior has really shifted. And I'll go back to the framework that ended up in the idea for Jolie being sort of passed through, no pun intended, this filter of starting the business. People are focused on their vanity and or vice. Changing consumer behavior, changing our habits is incredibly difficult. And we've always valued connection. We value experiences. Sure, we've sort of moved more experience driven over time in a way. And I'd say that there are more businesses that are being started that cater to or bring the buzzword of experience, which shouldn't be a buzzword, it's rooted in something substantial, to a product that might not have been viewed through that lens before. But sure, we can point to, trends that we've all heard about. COVID, people are paying more attention to their homes, and they're spending more time in their homes, so of course they're going to pay more attention to products that they have in their homes. But I do think that maybe this is not a common opinion here, but consumer behavior hasn't really, like, fundamentally has not shifted so much over time, other than, I'd say, what's obvious. So e-commerce is, of course, grown to an amazing level. People are buying more online. Okay, we can say that's a trend that's changed. The trends from COVID, there's long-lasting trends there. I think the way in which we think about reducing clutter in our lives, that certainly shifted the way in which we'll buy things. But it's not that people were hype-driven animals, and we want, even though we say we really want to be sustainable and we want to reduce our waste, at the end of the day, we don't want to change our behavior, and we don't want to forego convenience. We don't want to forego price for something that, even though we know it's the right decision, and I'm talking from a sustainability lens right now, we are rooted in our habit. There's a reminder to those starting businesses that, don't forget what draws people to pull out their wallets and what they're spending money on and why they're spending money on it, and the friction that we like to reduce naturally, and catering to not just a trend, but what's something to stay. Because a lot of consumer behavior trends that are written about are just that, they're trends, and they don't last. And I think if you're building a business to cater to a trend, then it's likely not a good business unless your business is in changing what you're doing every so often.
And have you guys seen any impact from either softening of the macro environment or any of these leading indicators that we're starting to see on the B2B side of things? Have you felt that that's impacted your growth or any sales, or seeing any leading indicators like that? And the reason I ask is because obviously it's a higher price point. It's a premium product. And so you might be subject to less of that impact. I'm just curious to see if, or hear rather, if you've felt that impact.
Sure, we certainly have, and the way in which we've felt it is, I'll use this phrase: we have to run to achieve what we might have achieved, via walking in a different environment. Where we are certainly noticing, I mean, there's indicators from the credit card debt, student loans coming back. I mean, they're no longer having support as many Americans did during COVID, and we're seeing an impact of that. The business is growing beautifully, but we know that the market is not what it was a few years ago. And we're lucky to have a product here. And I think when we think through our messaging as the macro environment shifts, we were actually just testing something out the other day where we sent out two emails. One was the price of the filter on a 3-month basis, which is when you actually pay for it. And the other was on a daily basis, which is 36 cents. And the email that said this is 36 cents a day performed way better. And I think that in this environment, consumers are certainly cutting spending and thinking about what's essential and what's not. And I do think that there's a reaction to a subscription that, oh no, I don't want to do anything that's a subscription. So our work, while we have 80% of our customers that do take subscription, is making sure that we're really communicating how fundamental this is and how cost effective it is when you really think about the use here. There's one last point I wanted to make relevant to your audience here, which, because I know that a lot of the prior guests coming from venture capital world and those listening probably in the same world as well. And to anyone who's thinking about starting a business, we didn't take VC money up front. We raised a few safe notes from friends and fam. There are a couple funds that are involved, but from a very small percentage and a dollar amount that they normally wouldn't invest, and that's just based on relationships. So it's not a traditional VC-backed company. Of course, there's a lot of talk about profitability, which I find funny because that should always be prioritized, in my opinion, for the most part. We are running a business that is profitable and where we're controlling our own destiny and funding our own growth. And a lot of the marketing that we're doing in this people oriented first approach of people influence people, the cost of the good is the cost of acquiring a customer. If assume one seeded product converts one person, we're not pouring a bunch of spend into paid ads. We are spending on paid ads, but that's not the only thing that we're doing. It allows us, all the things that we're doing outside paid allows us to spend more on paid and make paid work better and work more effectively and efficiently. And I'd say that the number one tool that I've learned, because this is the first time that I'm starting a business. I've worked with other entrepreneurs and I've watched them start their businesses, but it's the first time I'm in the driver's seat along with my partner Ryan. And I would say that the number one tool that a founder has is margin. And we have an 85 plus percent gross margin on our product. There are businesses that start with, and sure, it should be respective to your industry and what's realistic. It's much easier to reduce your price than it is to go the other way. And if you are starting with a lower margin, it's like you're handicapping yourself and just making it more difficult. And I think as we all focus a bit more on building businesses that truly have a path to profitability and are showing profitability, and that the unit economics actually work. There's a founder that just reached out to me, young founder, really ambitious guy, smart dude, reached out to me a couple weeks ago. He said, "Hey Arjun, we had to shut down the company." We got on the phone. I said, "Hey, what happened?" And he says, "Well, the unit economics weren't really working." That's something that you should really figure out prior to starting the business. So that goes back to the margin as the tool. And if you truly want to be responsible to your customers and be around in a couple years, you owe it to yourself to have a substantial margin that can fund the business and not be reliant solely on capital. I'm not speaking for every business out there. There are businesses that the strategy of growing extremely quickly, sans profit for some time can absolutely make sense given the model of that business. But there are too many businesses out there that start with a handicap, and I hope that will change.
Have you considered, maybe in the future raising capital or bringing on a strategic partner potentially?
Yeah, we have. We have. I think it depends upon where and when we want to take the business and how quickly. At this point, if you're asking me the question, are we raising capital? My answer would be no. But I won't rule that out completely. I can certainly see a time where we want to move into a certain direction and there'll be capital needs there. And I'm not saying it's bad to raise capital. You absolutely need capital to start a business. It's just doing so carefully and not being reliant on that capital in place of a business model that works. The capital should fuel and amplify the business model, but it shouldn't be the business model dependent on capital, because then it's not a business model.
No, definitely, especially in the CPG space, because then it's sometimes if you have too much money, you just end up throwing it all to CAC, and then your CAC to LTV gets all out of whack. And sometimes it can be hard to recover from that.
There's something to be said about running something tightly where you don't get as you can't afford to be lazy. and you hold your dollars a bit more accountable. And that's certainly, been a factor when we've thought about how much to raise.
Hopefully, you don't have a ton of investors flooding your inbox after
Exactly.
this call, but it's such a compelling opportunity that I'm sure you'll get a few. One question for you personally: what motivates you to work hard?
I've always been motivated by being able to put something out there in the world that you can offer to someone else, particularly if there's a benefit there. But that benefit can be an emotional benefit. It can make someone feel a certain way, which I have a passion for hospitality, and maybe in a few years we'll be talking about something I'm doing in hospitality and hotels in that world, or a product that makes someone look better or physically feel better. That's what motivates me to work hard and work smartly, and to put something out there that I love the feedback loop of someone coming up to me and saying that they experienced the product or the brand, and whether they have an opinion that's good or bad. I love the fact that I'm doing something and I'm putting something out there. And I know earlier you were, prior to this conversation, mentioning you might ask me about advice I would give my younger self, and it's very clear the advice I would give my younger self, which is just go for it, just start something. And I think that the shitty first draft is so important because it allows you to actually put pen to paper and then correct and edit and move on. And that's how it all starts. And I was always thinking about perfection or near perfection, or I'll do it once the idea is fully baked, whatever it might be. And that's what I would inspire other people to think through and to just act.
I think that's a great point. I think so often people try and wait until something's perfect, but in starting, whether it's software or a consumer product, you really need to build as the ship's sailing. So I think that's a great point. Arjun, thanks so much for coming on the podcast with Laura and I. I think we have a lot of takeaways, and this has been a great overview of how you've built Jolie, and congrats on all your success.
Thank you both. Really lovely to chat with you.